You want to know why some people seem to glide through life with an almost magnetic confidence, while you're stuck replaying the same self-sabotaging patterns over and over again? It's not because they're smarter than you. It's not because they work harder. It's because they've done something that terrifies most people, something that less than 3% of the population will ever have the courage to do. They've met their shadow. Carl Jung, the man who decoded the architecture of the human psyche, discovered that every single person walks around with a hidden self, a dark twin, a repository of every trait, impulse, and capacity you've been taught to deny. And here's the disturbing part. This shadow doesn't just sit quietly in your unconscious. It controls you. It sabotages your relationships. It undermines your success. It keeps you small, reactive, and psychologically impotent. But what if I told you that the very darkness you're running from contains the key to your psychological liberation? What if the path to becoming truly dangerous, truly powerful, requires you to descend into the parts of yourself that society trained you to bury? Welcome to shadow work. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Jung called it the most important psychological journey you'll ever take. Let me guess. You've tried everything, haven't you? The positive affirmations, the vision boards, the self-help books promising you can think yourself successful. And yet somehow you keep ending up in the same situations. The same toxic relationships, the same career plateaus, the same inexplicable moments where you watch yourself do the exact thing you swore you'd never do again. You see other people less qualified, less intelligent, less deserving than you, somehow commanding respect, setting boundaries, pursuing what they want without apology. Meanwhile, you're paralyzed by invisible chains. You people please when you want to assert yourself. You self-sabotage right before breakthrough moments. You feel anger rising but smile instead. You have ambitions but somehow never quite pursue them. And the worst part? You can't even explain why. Here's what's really happening. You've been conditioned, programmed since childhood to repress certain parts of yourself that society deemed unacceptable. Your anger, your selfishness, your darkness, your power. Every time you expressed these qualities, you were punished, subtly or overtly, until you learned to push them down into the basement of your psyche. But here's the brutal truth Jung understood. What you repress doesn't disappear. It gains power. Your shadow has been growing stronger in the darkness, and now it's controlling you from the unconscious. You're not the master of your own psyche. You're a puppet dancing to strings you can't even see. And until you face your shadow, you will remain psychologically enslaved. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just another psychologist scribbling theories in an ivory tower. This man went to war with his own psyche and came back with a map of the human unconscious that's still unmatched a century later. In 1913, Jung experienced what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a voluntary descent into psychological hell that would have destroyed a lesser mind. He dialogued with inner figures. He painted visions that emerged from his depths. He allowed himself to be temporarily overtaken by the very darkness most people spend their entire lives running from. And when he emerged, he had decoded something that the ancient alchemists, mystics, and philosophers had been circling for millennia: the process of individuation, becoming a complete, integrated, psychologically sovereign human being. Jung discovered that every person contains multiplicity. We're not singular selves, but a collection of archetypes, complexes, and shadow material. And the shadow, that dark repository of everything you've denied about yourself, isn't your enemy. It's your unrealized potential, your buried power, your route to psychological wholeness. While Freud was obsessed with sexual repression, Jung went deeper. He understood that civilization demands we sacrifice parts of ourselves to fit in. We create a persona, a mask we show the world. But behind that mask accumulates everything we've rejected: our capacity for cruelty, our selfish desires, our rage, our wild creativity, our hunger for power. Jung called shadow work making the darkness conscious. And he warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the operating manual for psychological integration, and most people will never read it. Lesson 1. Let me destroy a dangerous misconception right now. Your shadow is not some demonic entity trying to ruin your life. It's the collection of capacities and traits that your conditioning forced you to repress. Think about it. If you were raised to be nice, your shadow contains your healthy aggression and boundary-setting capacity. If you were taught that anger is bad, your shadow holds your righteous indignation and self-protection instinct. If you learned that wanting things for yourself is selfish, your shadow contains your ambition and self-advocacy. Here's what most people don't understand. Every quality has shadow and light expressions. Aggression can be toxic violence or healthy assertiveness. Selfishness can be narcissistic exploitation or necessary self-care. Manipulation can be gaslighting or strategic influence. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow. It's to integrate it. To consciously own these capacities so you can deploy them skillfully instead of having them erupt unconsciously at the worst possible moments. Jung observed that people who haven't integrated their shadow tend to project it outward. They see their own rejected qualities in others and react with disproportionate disgust or fascination. The person who's repressed their own aggression becomes hypersensitive to others' anger. The person who's denied their sexuality becomes obsessed with others' immorality. Your shadow work begins with a radical premise: nothing human is foreign to you. You contain every capacity for creation and destruction, for compassion and cruelty, for love and indifference. The question is whether you'll own these capacities consciously or remain their unconscious victim. Lesson 2. Here's your first practical technique, and it's going to make you uncomfortable. Pay attention to the people who trigger intense emotional reactions in you, not mild annoyance. I'm talking about disproportionate rage, disgust, or obsessive fascination. These people are mirrors, showing you your own rejected qualities. Jung discovered that we don't react strongly to traits we've fully integrated. If you're comfortable with your own assertiveness, other people's aggression might register as interesting or challenging, but it won't send you into emotional chaos. But if you've repressed your own capacity for aggression, someone else's assertiveness will feel like a personal attack. Start a shadow journal. Write down 3 people who provoke intense reactions in you. Then ask yourself the question that makes most people squirm. What quality in them am I refusing to see in myself? The arrogant colleague who dismisses others' ideas. Maybe they're expressing the confidence you've been too afraid to claim. The manipulative friend who always gets their way. Perhaps they're wielding the strategic influence you've judged as wrong. The selfish family member who prioritizes their own needs. They might be demonstrating the self-advocacy you've labeled as bad. This is brutal work because it requires you to admit that you contain the very qualities you've spent years judging in others. But here's the liberation. Once you own these qualities consciously, you can choose how to express them skillfully instead of having them control you unconsciously. The shadow doesn't want to be eliminated. It wants to be seen. It wants to be acknowledged. And the moment you turn toward it instead of running away, it begins to transform from enemy into ally. Lesson 3. Jung's most powerful technique was something he called active imagination, a structured process for engaging directly with unconscious content. This isn't meditation. This isn't positive visualization. This is psychological warfare with yourself. Here's how it works. You're going to invite your shadow to speak to you. And yes, I understand how insane that sounds. But this is exactly what Jung did during his confrontation with the unconscious, and it's the fastest route to integration. Find a quiet space. Close your eyes. Imagine a figure emerging from darkness, a representation of everything you've rejected about yourself. Don't control what it looks like. Let it emerge spontaneously. For some people, it appears as a same-sex figure. For others, it's an animal or a shadowy humanoid form. Now ask it a question. What do you want from me? And then, this is crucial, let it answer. Don't censor. Don't analyze. Don't judge. Let words, images, or emotions arise without interference. Most people's shadows say some version of the same thing. I want to be acknowledged. I want to stop being imprisoned. I want you to stop pretending I don't exist. Continue the dialogue. Ask, what gift are you trying to give me? Your shadow might reveal that your repressed anger is actually trying to protect you. Your denied selfishness is attempting to ensure your needs get met. Your hidden cruelty is your capacity for necessary ruthlessness in protecting what matters. This isn't role-playing. This is engaging with dissociated parts of your psyche that have been operating autonomously in your unconscious. By bringing them into conscious dialogue, you begin the integration process. Warning: this work can be destabilizing. If you have severe trauma or mental health concerns, do this with a qualified Jungian analyst. But for most people, active imagination is the royal road to shadow. Integration. Lesson 4: Jung identified that each person has a psychological type with a dominant function and an inferior function, the mode of consciousness we're weakest at and most likely to avoid. And here's the counterintuitive insight. Your inferior function is where your shadow hides, and it's your pathway to wholeness. If you're a thinking type who lives in logic and analysis, your inferior function is feeling. Your shadow contains all the emotions you've judged as irrational, all the relational messiness you've avoided. Your growth requires descending into the very emotional realm that feels foreign and uncomfortable. If you're a sensation type focused on concrete reality and practical details, your inferior function is intuition. Your shadow holds your visionary capacity, your ability to see patterns and possibilities. Your development demands you venture into the abstract realm that feels impractical and nebulous. The inferior function feels dangerous because it's undeveloped. When you operate from it, you feel incompetent, childish, out of control. But Jung understood that psychological wholeness requires developing all 4 functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. Here's your practice. Identify your inferior function. Then deliberately engage it, knowing you'll be terrible at first. If you're a thinking type, sit with emotions without analyzing them. If you're a feeling type, practice making decisions based purely on logic. If you're intuitive, ground yourself in physical sensations and concrete details. If you're a sensation type, practice abstract thinking and future visioning. Your shadow lives in your inferiority, and the only way to integrate it is to become temporarily incompetent in the service of future mastery. Lesson 5. You've experienced this, even if you didn't have words for it. Those moments when you're suddenly overtaken by disproportionate emotion or behavior that doesn't match your self-concept. You explode in rage over something minor. You seduce someone you shouldn't. You sabotage a success you've been working toward. Then afterward you think, that wasn't like me. I don't know what came over me. That's your shadow erupting from the unconscious. Jung observed that the more we repress shadow material, the more likely it is to possess us during moments of stress, intoxication, or lowered psychological defenses. The repressed doesn't stay repressed. It returns, often at the worst possible moment. Think about the moralistic politician caught in a sex scandal, the righteous religious leader who's secretly abusing their position, the nice person who suddenly commits an act of shocking cruelty. These aren't contradictions, they're shadow eruptions. The more extreme the persona, the mask we show the world, the more extreme the shadow becomes. Your practice: start noticing moments of disproportionate reaction, when you overreact to minor situations, when you feel possessed by emotions that don't match the stimulus, when you do things that violate your self-image. These are shadow eruptions, messages from the unconscious that something needs to be integrated. Instead of judging these moments, get curious about them. Ask, what part of me that I've been denying just tried to express itself? The answer is always some capacity or need that your persona has been suppressing. The goal isn't to eliminate shadow eruptions. It's to notice them early and integrate the underlying material so the eruptions become less extreme and more controllable. Lesson 6. Here's the insight that changes everything. Your shadow doesn't just contain your negative traits. It contains your greatest undeveloped potentials, what Jung called the gold in the shadow. Because society and family don't just shame you for being too angry or selfish. They also shame you for being too powerful, too creative, too ambitious, too visible, too successful. So you bury these qualities alongside the ones you think of as negative. The quiet person's shadow might contain an incredible capacity for leadership they've been too afraid to claim. The rational person's shadow might hold profound artistic gifts they've dismissed as impractical. The agreeable person's shadow might contain world-changing vision they've been too polite to assert. Jung observed that we often project our positive shadow qualities onto others through admiration and idealization. The people you put on pedestals, the ones you think possess qualities you could never have, are often showing you your own buried potential. Make a list of people you deeply admire. Then ask, what quality in them am I refusing to claim in myself? The charismatic speaker who commands attention? That capacity exists in your shadow. The artist who creates without apology? That creative audacity is in your darkness. The leader who makes difficult decisions? That authority lives in your repressed material. This is the most subversive truth about shadow work. The qualities you most need to become who you're capable of being are hidden in the parts of yourself you're most afraid to examine. Your shadow isn't just a repository of socially unacceptable traits. It's a treasure house of unrealized potential that's been waiting for you to have the courage to claim it. Lesson 7. Let me be brutally clear about something. Shadow work is not about becoming a better person, according to society's standards. It's not about eliminating your darkness and becoming pure light. That's spiritual bypassing, and it's another form of repression. Jung's vision of psychological health was individuation, becoming a complete, integrated individual who contains and can consciously navigate all aspects of human experience. Not a saint, not a monster, a sovereign being who owns their full humanity. Integration means you acknowledge, yes, I contain the capacity for cruelty, and I choose when and how to deploy necessary ruthlessness. Yes, I have selfish desires, and I honor my own needs alongside others. Yes, I have aggressive impulses, and I channel them into healthy assertion and boundary protection. The integrated person isn't controlled by their shadow because they've made it conscious. They can access their full range of capacities, light and dark, and deploy them strategically according to the situation. This is what makes someone truly dangerous in the best sense. They're no longer predictable. They're no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. They can be compassionate or ruthless, gentle or fierce, cooperative or competitive. Whatever the moment demands, society wants you to specialize in light. To be consistently nice, agreeable, non-threatening. But complete human beings contain multitudes. They're comfortable with paradox. They've integrated their contradictions. Your practice. Stop trying to eliminate parts of yourself. Start asking, how can I integrate this capacity so I can use it consciously rather than being used by it? This is the shift from psychological victim to psychological master. Lesson 8. I need to warn you about something before you go deeper into this work. Shadow integration will destroy your false self. Your carefully constructed persona, the acceptable version of you that you've been showing the world, will crack and crumble. You'll lose relationships with people who are only comfortable with your mask. You'll outgrow communities that required you to stay small. You'll find that the identity you've been defending wasn't even yours. It was a survival mechanism you developed to gain approval. Jung described this phase as the dark night of the soul, a necessary death that precedes psychological rebirth. It's disorienting, it's destabilizing, and it's absolutely essential, because here's what most people don't realize. You cannot become who you're capable of being while clinging to who you've pretended to be. The false self must die for the true self to emerge. This is why shadow work terrifies people. It's not just about acknowledging uncomfortable traits. It's about allowing a complete restructuring of your identity. You might discover that the career you've built isn't actually yours. It's what your parents wanted. The personality you've cultivated isn't authentic. It's what gained you acceptance. The goals you've been pursuing aren't meaningful. They're what society told you to want. The dark night strips away everything false, leaving only what's essentially you, and that can feel like annihilation. But on the other side of this death is something people spend entire lifetimes searching for: authentic psychological sovereignty. If you're in the dark night right now, if shadow work has destabilized your sense of self, know this: you're exactly where you need to be. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by remaining a caterpillar. It dissolves into liquid before reorganizing into something capable of flight. So here you are, at a choice point. You can close this video and return to the comfortable lie that you can become powerful through positive thinking alone. You can keep running from your shadow, pretending that the darkness doesn't exist, staying safe and small and psychologically enslaved, or you can do what less than 3% of people will ever have the courage to do. Turn toward your darkness and reclaim the power you've been conditioned to deny. Imagine yourself 6 months from now having done this work. You walk into rooms differently. There's a weight to your presence that wasn't there before. People unconsciously give you space, respect your boundaries without you having to explain them. You pursue what you want without apology or self-sabotage. You can be kind when kindness serves you, and ruthless when ruthlessness is required. You're no longer reactive, no longer controlled by unconscious patterns, no longer imprisoned by repressed material. You've become psychologically sovereign, complete, integrated, whole. But that version of you is only accessible through the work Jung described, through confronting what you've been running from, through dialoguing with your darkness, through integrating what you've denied. The world is divided into two types of people, those who've met their shadow and those who are controlled by it without knowing. The second group vastly outnumbers the first. They're easier to manipulate, easier to control, easier to predict. They're psychologically impotent, dancing to unconscious scripts written by childhood conditioning. But you have the opportunity to join the 3%, to become truly dangerous, not in the sense of harming others, but in the sense of being psychologically untouchable, unmanipulatable, uncontrollable. Start today. Start now. Begin your shadow journal. Identify your projections. Practice active imagination. Embrace your inferior function. Watch for shadow eruptions. Search for the gold in your darkness. Jung spent his life mapping this territory, so you wouldn't have to navigate it blind. The map exists. The path is clear. The only question is whether you have the courage to walk it. Drop a comment below telling me one quality you've been running from, one aspect of your shadow you're ready to acknowledge. Let's build a community of people brave enough to do this work. And if you want to go deeper, I've put together resources on Jungian psychology and shadow integration in the description below. This is just the beginning. Your shadow isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's been waiting for you to be brave enough. The darkness is calling. Are you finally ready to answer?